Have you ever seen your child clearly understand something and yet wants to repeat the lesson over and over and over? In my video on competence and closure, the 2C's, you have seen that there are 4 outcomes to every lesson. Competency, yes or no. Closure, yes or no. 2 times 2. 4 possible combinations of competency and closure. Every single time your child does a lesson, there will be one of these 4 possible lesson outcomes based on competence and closure. This is the second of the 4-part video series on the 2C's and the 4 learning outcomes. Today's video covers the scenario when a student has competency but not closure. I'll show you how to recognize this, the bad outcomes that typically occur, and what you may do instead to generate good outcomes where children are excited to learn and to perform at their highest level. You might remember Sally's classmate Kieran from the intro video. Like Sally, Kieran loves math and is good at it. Like Billy, Kieran asks lots of questions, often well beyond the scope of the class. Why do we need fractions when we have percents? Aren't the two the same? Can you make a fraction with numbers that aren't integers? The teacher is exasperated because he's so far ahead. She scolds him for being disruptive. Kieran is enjoying this lesson and can't get enough. He could explore this lesson for hours. When we see this as a parent, our first impulse is to say, "Oh, honey, I see that you've got this, and we've got a lot to cover, so why don't we move on?" But I urge you, please don't do this. Don't give in to this impulse. It's actually counterproductive. Repetition, when driven by the child, builds interesting and valuable connections and pathways in the brain that are at the core of a solid foundation. When that child does something over and over, the brain is engaged and that child is focused and concentrated. Maria Montessori says, "Never interrupt a focused and concentrated child." The child may be testing the edges of the topic being covered, or maybe the child is looking for counterexamples or cases where what's being learned doesn't apply. Or maybe it's simply that the learning style of the child matches the learning style of the lesson. They're just having a good time. Or maybe the child is enjoying the power and endorphin release of doing something well and gaining confidence. All good things. Who would want to be stopped or, worse yet, criticized or judged harshly because you were gaining confidence at something? The best thing you can do for your child's growth and well-being is to say something like, "I am so impressed by your focus and concentration. I'm going to tend to the garden. Let me know when you're ready to move on or need some help." And walk away. Yes, just walk away. Your child's busy right now, and you're only a distraction. When your child reaches closure, you'll be the first to know. There's another problem with pushing the child to move on. First, it violates the Montessori principle of follow the child. But even more important, it stresses the importance of the result, competence, over the process. In truth, and for that matter in business and personal relationships, having a great process results in much better outcomes and well-being. That's why saying something like, "I admire your focus and concentration. You should be proud of yourself," sends a reassuring message that you trust them and you think their process is good. And this provides comfort to the child that the result will be too. There's yet another danger to pushing a child to move on without closure. The child feels stress. She's enjoying the process, learning, testing the edges, making mistakes, and fixing them, feeling good about doing it right, and getting an endorphin release from the process. Moving on before the child has closure fosters anxiety and hinders development of those very valuable focus and concentration skills. Ever wonder why so many children today have ADD or ADHD? It's often because adults don't let them get closure. At Shillerlearning, we've seen children do 10 lessons in 10 minutes, and the 11th lesson takes 3 days. That's a good thing. So when a parent asks us, how long should a lesson take? The only correct answer is, follow the child. By the way, this competency but not closure case that we're discussing is when a child may ask for additional practice or to be drilled. They're getting it and they're starting to feel self-confident. They're seeking approval, encouragement, and praise from you. And by all means, give them all three. And give them all the drills they can handle. Just because they've exhausted the practice examples their curriculum publisher has provided doesn't mean it's time to move on. You might wonder what to do if a child has done all their practice problems and wants more. By watching these videos, you know that one thing not to say is, okay, you've done the problems, let's move on. At Shillerlearning, we've developed an innovative learning method we call Become Your Own Teacher. And I've done a separate video on this simple but amazing technique. When your child is in repetition mode, be self-aware that you may have closure, but resist the temptation to assume that the child does too. It's hard, but your patience will be rewarded with a much more self-confident and capable child. By the way, this self-awareness comes in handy when your child is taking the Shillerlearning diagnostic review tests. These tests uncover when children lack competence. They also uncover when children lack closure. Their eyes will sparkle. They'll tackle that question with gusto. Two good indications that they have competence but not closure. Now, it may seem counterintuitive to flag this question and to go back and do the prescribed lessons for a test question they answered correctly. But when a child doesn't have closure, it's actually the right thing to do because you're simply giving your child the opportunity to get closure and a more robust foundation of understanding, doing something they enjoy doing. One other thing about the Shillerlearning diagnostic review tests. On our website, we provide you with a time-saving lesson planner. You or your child simply checks the boxes for the questions answered incorrectly and for those questions on which the child answered correctly but does not yet have closure. And the site gives you a list of lessons to do along with a custom PDF that has just those lessons. It's a convenient way to introduce new students into Shillerlearning and to quickly identify and fill all the holes in their math and or language arts foundation. By using this innovative approach, parents find that filling these holes efficiently removes roadblocks that previously prevented progress. Students often zoom up 1 or 2 grade levels in just a few weeks. By knowing and recognizing this lesson outcome, and by having your child gain that same ability, you've just removed a key obstacle to children enjoying their studies and reaching their full potential. And you've gained yourself some free time along the way. In our next video in this series, we'll explore what happens when a student has closure, but not competency. As before, what we suggest may be a surprise.